Good evening and welcome. The time is 6:05 p.m. I'd like to call to order the January 16th, 2024 School Committee Special Meeting held in the School Committee Conference Room of the Stoughton Public Schools District Office at 31 Pierce Street in Stoughton, Massachusetts. This meeting is being recorded by SMAC for future broadcasting. We have a quorum present, so let's begin. Can I have a motion to open the special meeting?
So moved.
All right, the motion was made by Chris. A second? The motion was seconded by Lindsay. The motion has been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 All right, the motion is carried 5-0. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This special meeting is to discuss the FY25 budget and articles only. On December 12th, 2023, the school committee voted to approve a budget of $67,882,835, an increase of 15.64% over FY24. The significant increase reflects Stoughton Public Schools' growing enrollment, specifically of students who qualify as special education, English language, or multilingual learners, and low income. There's also transportation costs, a whole nother factors. We have real significant needs for all of our students and will need any additional chapter funding. The FY25 budget the school committee voted on was built around the assumption of yet another large increase in Chapter 70 funding. We do not know what that funding will be until later this month, and there's no guarantee we will continue to receive the unprecedented amounts of the past 2 years, and the state's revenue projections are lower than expected. So at this point in time, the funding we can rely on is our current Chapter 70 funding and revenue from the town. In the past, at this point in time, we would not assume these large Chapter 70 funding increases. Last year, for example, we had a flat budget with an increase of 1.19% that did not ask for any additional funds from taxpayers, in keeping with the town's focus on resolving issues with the health insurance and the increased Chapter 70 funding from the year before. And then our process would be, after we presented those conservative budgets to the Select Board and the Finance Committee, we would then ask to reopen the budget once we knew the numbers for our required foundation budget or net school spending and any increase in Chapter 70 funding, both set by the state. This year, however, because we did assume the Chapter 70 funding, there is a large discrepancy between our proposed increase and that proposed by the Select Board. The Select Board has proposed a 3.8% increase in the municipal budget, and that's what they are considering a balanced budget. We understand that the town's goal is to reduce the use of free cash, so we are, would like to have a balanced budget that relies primarily on increased Chapter 70 funding rather than that. We're committed to a budget that is fully funded and serves the needs of all our students. That said, because we have this pressure to re-examine our budget in light of the fact that we do not yet know the Chapter 70 funding, we've asked Dr. Baeta and Ms. Perkins and the entire business office, who've worked very hard, and we appreciate your work, your many hours of work on the budget, to re-examine the budget and propose some other options for us to consider. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Baeta.
Madam Chair, thank you so much to you, the members of the committee, the general public, and my colleagues. A couple of things to go through. So in a number of good communications that went through the chair, and I believe Mr. Cavey representing the Select Board, myself, and the town manager, I was asked to go back and really take a look at this budget and come up with something that was closer, if you will, to the 3.8% plus another $2 million for, I believe, a total of 7.2% is the total. What we've done is we've tried to provide you with updated lists. So I'm going to tell you the first list to look at is going to be this list here. We want to take a look at option B and C, and I just want to make sure that you understand how this reads. What I've done is we've gone through and eliminated the 4.0 assistant principals that were originally in the recommendation, the 5 interventionists down from 10 that was in the ESSER funds, the dean of students at the middle school, the part-time groundskeeper going to full-time, the social teachers at the high school, and materials and supplies expense lines to bring version B down to 65,854,475. Then we went even further. We took a look at our biggest surprise, which you know is within our 200% increase in EL students and our special education mandates. And what we did is we went through, and again, we went through and we cut all of those positions. which becomes your version C, which is at the top of this budget that says version C, small print right in the middle. You'll see, option C, I'm sorry. You'll see a new option C that is $6,506,402 on the last page of that, page 13. $6,506,402. And we are putting back into that $6,506,402, $189,726 in the following special education positions. So now if you go back to version option of the one-page handout, and you go to the one-page option C, we are putting back the following positions. The RISE teacher at $66,198. The RISE paraprofessionals, 3 at $57,330. And the preschool teacher / facilitator at $66,198. That's totally based on enrollment. So all three of those situations are really two. Our RISE classroom, that's going to the given school with the direct need of those students, needs a teacher and the support staff. And then the preschool here, because of the number of students that we are taking in. Everything else currently, as a recommendation, is out. Okay? So that brings our full budget discussion to get to 7.2% to 7.2% is $4,230,625. Yeah. Yes, the 7.2 is $4,230,625. Yep. So if you take that and the budget number I just read of an increase, which is now $6,696,128. So on page 13, this page here, we're adding to that bottom number the 189 of the positions I just said we're bringing back into the budget because they are mandated. That new number means that the differential between 7.2% and our budget right now is $2.4 million. $2,465,503. So our shortfall right now is $2,465,503. Of course, we would be looking hopefully for Chapter 70 being able to help us with that. And it's my understanding that in order to meet the needs that the Select Board have based on the town charter, you'll be potentially voting a budget that meets the 7.2%, with the understanding that we'll be looking for Chapter 70 funding to offset this $2.4 million. Let me get into the $2.4 million and what it means. It means that the following items will have to be further discussed once we know what House 1 looks like. Does that make sense? Unemployment, which is only $50,000 in our operating budget, will have to be discussed. Because if we have to unemploy staff, we also have to have an unemployment line to pay for that, right? So basically the old guard saying, my way of being taught by an old business manager many years ago was, for every 2 people that you lay off, you pretty much have to lay off a third to make up the actual cost to put into that line item. So you can see that that would be the last resort that I would make as superintendent to you would be staffing, the last resort. However, this budget does include the new bus that we were putting in is no longer in this budget. I currently, as of today, have 110 secondary students who are on a waiting list. We have 1 elementary bus that is full and 2 that are close to being full. Once the bad weather hits, we get more and more phone calls. Very typical. So there is a need, right? But it's already cut. Remember last year to this year, we went +1. This would be another +1 FY '24 to '25. Does that make sense? Okay. The next thing is, here's a projection. When you see budget cuts, you see an increase in special education. Been doing this for a long time. You just typically see that because higher class sizes are going to lead to parents wanting to say, why isn't my kid there yet, so on and so forth. In this budget proposal already, we have 2 more students that are out of district than we had when we gave you the budget. That's how much the churn is within the student population. So we're going to have to make up for that. Unfortunately, you may have to discuss fees. A very good decision that was made in terms of, as you know, just in the first 2 athletic seasons, we had over 200 more participants because we didn't have fees. And transportation fees is the other big one for us. Our budget does not include, because it's separate, our shelter population students. That is currently 84. We anticipate that the Hampton Inn to be full and be very close there. And they have, both hotels have a license with this, a contract with the state through December of this year. So that would mean the students would be staying through another. Now, that is different money so far that the state is providing to us. It is not part of our Chapter 70 count in October, and it's being supplemented by $104, of which I think I've been told 35 times we're getting it this month. So I'm hoping for it to come in this month because the bills are real for that situation. So when you look at the next big thing, we have those curriculum areas, those library areas, the software areas, the band in terms of like the band competition that we really wanted to do in our budget. Those things will also have to be discussed. Again, I want to assure both all of you and our staff, we're not talking about laying off people today, because that would be a nightmare for us to be doing in January. What we're talking about is we'll have more information as we move forward on what this really looks like. And so House 1 becomes important to our discussions with you and the Select Board and the town and the Finance Committee and myself and the town manager. But level funding materials and supplies, it's $100 here, $300 there, $400. It adds up to a few bucks, but it's not going to buy into $2.4 million. Lastly, and I think as important, you've heard me say, and I know that Mr. Coulter's here tonight, and I know he has said it, we have a very changing industry. Not only do we have a demographic shift that's taking place within our school community, but the other part of it is that employees tell employers how much they're making for salary. You know, we are literally, and I'm happy to say this, I will steal any good, excellent teacher to come work in Stoughton. And if they're good and they're going to make us move, we're paying. Just today, we hired a special ed teacher for $107,000. Why? There was no $57,000 candidate. They're not there. They're not available to us. We actually had somebody who's leaving one of the big urban districts to come home, if you will, and taking a significant pay cut to come to Stoughton. But it's time for them to be closer to home and so on and so forth. But my point is, we're not hiring and budgeting and being able to hire $57,000 positions like I did just 3 to 4 years ago. I could hire a sped teacher at $65,000. I could hire an elementary teacher at $54,000. Those days are gone. We don't have the numbers, so therefore our actual cost to the budget is contractual obligation to those employees. So between all of that, one last thing to keep in mind. It is the school committee's responsibility, and I'll make recommendations, but it's your call, to really take a look at what we build back if we're able to. Okay? If House 1 is good to Stoughton or reasonable or gives us something, then priority will be our EL population. That'll be priority 1. And the only reason for that is the option here is to hire somebody part-time in the case of the liaisons, or contract services. Contract services is $55 an hour minimum. And in some languages, 3 figures. So an hour. So that just takes care of a line item and blows it up in general. So as we work to get to, by House 1, by the town has a responsibility to forward to the FinCom by charter a budget. I believe the recommendation is a balanced budget is what they're looking to do, and then we'll know a lot more about what's going to happen. There are 2 other things that I think I want you to really take a look at. One is the issues that we're having with our class sizes. Now, this is I want to be very careful how I say this because I'm very pro-child, but we are sheltering a number of students in this town that is causing our class size philosophy to go away. In other words, we do have elementary class sizes that are pushing 20 and 21 now, and we've always been very much around small class sizes, especially in K-5, especially in K-3. That is, we can't control that. We have an obligation by the law, and that's what I have to do. The second part that I think is important is a little history of this. So as you know, we have, most of our contracts are done. We have one that we're still working on at paraprofessionals, which we hope to be able to hopefully get done this week. We have one more meeting, and I've communicated with their leader of what we discussed in order to try to finalize that deal. That said, that is also an area where we continuously have open positions because we can't pay $15 an hour for somebody who's going to deal with some potential real physical issues that happen in the classroom with some of our neediest students. So to that end, that is an area where we need to grab from other places, because there too, there are no bodies to go after. And so if you want to compete for an increase in EL population that needs supports and an increase in special education, then we need to also be in that game to be able to hire those types of positions away from local districts or from within the economy, or and to join Stoughton Public Schools. The most important part of my communication to you today is we are not at a point of scaring our staff and employees. We are not there. I can't tell you, as someone who's had to cut staff, that in this kind of economy, that's not a discussion. At the same time, we have to be fair that when we do know something, we have to communicate and go through the seniority process and so on and so forth. But it's really important, that I communicate very clear. We're not at that point, but we could be at that point, and then we're going to have to make those difficult decisions. Yes, sir.
Well, first, thank you for doing this work. To my understanding, you were here on the holiday.
I was all over the place on the holiday. I was at MLK, which, by the way, just a sidebar, fantastically well done. And then, yes, here and at home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And probably members of your staff
Yes.
have gone beyond the call of duty to prepare this request that's coming from the municipal side. I have a question to start us off. Given the budget, the cuts that they're requesting, is this an overall positive thing for the education of the children of Stoughton, or is it a negative?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, right? What we put together for the school committee as a budget was what we call a needs budget. There's a lot of words that are being used out there, but the amount of requests that I received and what we went forward with was a plan that you supported at the time. And that plan was social and emotional well-being, the behavioral issues we're seeing in the buildings, the need to really tackle some of those issues at an earlier age so that we're not dealing with those issues that make our community have bigger problems down the line. So that's what we went forth with. For example, and I'll give you an example. The 10 interventionists that were in the ESSER funding, I made a decision. I said, you know what, I can't fund 10, but I'm going to put one in every building. What's that going to work towards? Well, to be quite honest, it's going to be a targeted K-3, working on our at least 90% of kids getting there, taking our kids that are almost there and getting them over the hump. We know some of the other kids who have bigger struggles are already getting services in most cases, but that was part of our plan. That is now out. So my thing, though, is, and I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face, I guess. This is a process. I'm used to a very much different process. I know the Stoughton process from days at town meeting and sitting in your seat. But we're also going through a very changing demographic that has seen some potential fiscal positive. SOA, Student Opportunity Act, was done for one reason only. It took communities that were going through significant change who had not been supported at the level that they should have and gave it. I came, as I've told you before, I came from the opposite, a community that did get it. Now they're actually taking it down to a number where everything's on the local taxpayer. Your last budget was a pretty significant increase from Chapter 70. Your budget before that had a fall town meeting that was pretty significant increase. We're entering the fourth year of SOA. We anticipate that it'll be something, but we have a curveball here to answer your question, the economy. We don't know where this economy is going right now. We do know, and Mr. Calta shared with us the the state cuts that have already taken place by cutting some, and that actually also impacts some of our grants, right? So we're starting to see that already. So does the governor in the next 2 weeks or next week send a House budget that is, giving us $1,300 per student like we've received this past year, or is she giving it $60 per student like I received in my last district? We don't know that yet. I would think that the number is could be lower simply because the concerns of the economy. But I would also tell you that there's a lot of stuff out there. Long-winded, there's a millionaire's tax that passed in this Commonwealth, and I'm still not sure how we're using it, to be quite honest. I know that there were grants given to preschool situations, but I know that also many people voted for that because it supports two things: transportation and public education. Transportation and public education. We know we have a situation in one of our major cities in terms of transportation, so I would anticipate lots of money going in there. But there is a rainy fund, and then there's that account as well that should lead to some type of funding for public education. Yes, sir.
From what you said, is it fair for me to assume that these cuts could be very detrimental to many families and children in the town of Stoughton, especially related to social and emotional learning and education?
Yeah, so my biggest concern that I have at this point is if the SOA funding doesn't come through, the discussions we're going to have are going to be real. And but what do I mean by real? It means we're going to eventually have to talk about bodies, and that has a direct impact on everything from the classroom to evaluation to moving the district forward. Those are going to have impacts. We're going to have to probably already started to scale back on things like what do we offer in the summertime? We'll probably be offering things like extended school year special education requirements, but some of these other camps and stuff, what we do, they're probably going to be a fee-based. We know that there's a detriment in a town that has 54% in climbing of its students in the high needs area, if you will, that will keep kids from participating in those things. So those would be my concerns when the time comes, that we're going to have to really sit down and really look at what's the least impact in our classrooms. So traditionally, it's not unusual for school committees to have and inform the superintendent, okay, what does class size look at the high school? Boost it. Middle school, boost it. Stay away from K-3 as much as possible. Right? That's typically what I would hear from the school committee. Support staff. Who do we really need? So now you get into these positions that have made us move forward, and potentially we have to scale them back. So that's the general. Yes, anytime you put together your goals and needs for the district, and you have to scale back on it, I think that. But I also think that the school committee, working with the select board, is also trying to be, at this time, a team player, if you will. Make sure that the select board are voting a budget. It goes forth, it meets a deadline, and then a lot of discussions between the chairs of the school committee and the select board and myself and Mr. Coulter will probably have to take place, and then eventually evolve the five of you and the entire select board. And then eventually, of course, FinCom has a lot of say, or I should say has a say in the process of bringing together a budget recommendation.
In your discussions with the select board and the town manager, have they shared the cuts they're going to be making?
No, I have not had those discussions at all. No, what I did in taking our presentation and our budget is I then took through the communication that started amongst the chair, the vice chair, the chair of the school committee, the vice chair, on behalf of the select board, Catherine, on your behalf, but I didn't look at municipal side. That wouldn't be a purview of the superintendent to be making in terms of. I run the school department. Yes, I know I live in town and all that stuff, but my job is to work for you to put together what I think is in the best interest of the school department, and then you folks and the select board and town manager and myself can have those discussions, as well as FinCom and then town meeting.
Perhaps the town manager can help us answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be delighted to. Stay right there, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer Amando's question. When we start our budget process in late September, it starts with guidance from the Select Board. And the Select Board gave me, and through me, department heads specific budget guidance for FY25. There were 3 parts to it, actually 4 parts. They said they wanted to maintain level services, meaning no new services. We're going to do what we're doing now. We cannot increase the budget more than 2.5% against the levy limit, so that gives us a cap of if you take the school and the town, 3.8 each. Obviously, the schools are a much larger budget, so that's more money, but it's 3.8 each. And a reduction in full-time employees. A reduction in full-time employees, a net reduction. So we could hire some, but we had to offset it with reductions in other places where they're not being fully utilized. And the last element was to maintain the level of quality that we give to the town now in DPW, in police, in fire. So that leaves a very small portion of our budget to work with when police and fire and DPW, which is 75% of our budget, are untouchable. So we spent no less than 200 hours of our budget committee going through every single line item, and where we needed to hire someone, we needed to eliminate a position. And we ended up with 5.6 fewer FTEs than we start next year, FY25, compared to this year's. All of them very, very, very painful. And the board has voted our budget at 3.8%. This was not the year for us, for the municipal side. I greatly admire what you're charged with doing on the school side. I really do. And I understand the needs, having been a school committee member myself. But on the town side, we're more of a static operation. We don't have the dramatic changes in demands that you have, that you're charged with. We're not unsympathetic to that at all. We're very understanding of that. But on the town side, we were charged with those budget guidelines. And it was my job to work with a 4-member budget committee and interview every single department head at least 3 times until we got to that number. And just like you may have to look at fees, we had to look at fees that were causing our budget to carry substantial structural deficits. We had a structural deficit in water. We had a structural deficit in sewer. We had a structural deficit in the V&A. And we had a structural deficit in trash. And we had a structural deficit in health insurance. Those 5 structural deficits were causing $4 million in subsidies. And by adjusting the fee schedule to get to break even, we eradicated those deficits and were able to use that money in our budget. We also looked at innovative ways to reduce costs. We studied at great length the features and the benefits of joining Regional 911. And in the final end, I made the decision, it was an operating decision, to join Regional 911, which will give us a 3-year period where we reduce our budget by $1 million for dispatches per year. And Regional 911 will pay $8 to $10 million for our capital improvements in emergency EMS. So we try to run the town, which again, I don't compare to the schools, because the schools, you have a changing environment, ongoing changing environment. There's really no comparison. We have a static business. My business is much easier to run than your business. There's no question about it. By joining 911, we saved $1 million. By removing 9 employees, we saved $1 million. By removing the subsidies, we saved $4.5 to $5 million. So we're able to maintain current services, dealing with the same challenges you have on salaries. I mean, the way salaries have escalated is unsustainable, but it's real. You lose those people, you lose those services. And so we just finished contracts with police and fire that are the highest increases in recent history, or we lose people. And we're 14 patrolmen down right now, below minimum staffing. So we have the same challenges in the sense of the economy. We have different challenges in that our business is more static than yours. Yours is ever-changing all the time. and I admire the way you are trying to respond to those changes. I hope that gives you a bit of a summary as to where we are.
No, it doesn't. My question is, what cuts have you made?
What cuts have we made?
What cuts will you be making relating to people?
We have 6 less FTEs, full-time employees, for fiscal '25
So they were let go?
than we have right now.
They were let go?
Not let go if they leave because of retirement or attrition, or our business model. We joined Regional 911. We reduced all the dispatches.
Those are not cuts.
That's your definition, sir. They're reductions in
My definition of
FTEs.
cuts is to have someone there and then say goodbye when you're no longer
We
servicing
did that with
them.
we did that with the dispatchers. We said goodbye.
How many?
They're no longer employed by the town.
How many?
9.
9?
Mr. Barbosa, if I may, if that's okay for me to, I think that we want to be, and I appreciate your questions very much, but I think what we need to do is decide on what we're going to do at this time, and then come back full circle as needed over the course of the next couple of weeks to, I think, address some of the questions that you have, which I'm sure will take place during the Finance Committee meetings. And I don't, you're my boss, so I'm not trying to, you do what you need to do, but at the end of the day, we're trying tonight to have a discussion and a vote that can go to the select board to meet a deadline. And then after that, we have approximately another week to 10 days for us to have, I'll probably be calling an emergency meeting of the school committee once we have some more information, to go back. I am not in the position, as you know, to have a discussion with Tom or the fire chief or anyone else about what they're cutting or not cutting. That can be done, but I think that the most important part for us tonight is to move us forward, keep those questions coming, in my opinion. I need to address potentially $2.4 million to you in the next couple of weeks, and then see if we can find an opportunity for more money to be provided to us, so we're not having this discussion about either side cutting positions, if that makes any sense.
Oh, I just wanted to get a feel as to how big an emergency this is, and is it town-wide, or is it something where it's not evenly distributed throughout the town?
Madam Chair, apologize for interrupting. I want to make sure I understand. We're on a limited time right now. We have a 7 o'clock deadline.
We do.
Okay, and I do want to make sure, I know that some of my colleagues have their own questions that we might want to ask to clarify so that we can make an informed vote. Can we move the question for now? Thank you.
Fabia, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I do want to agree with Armando with regards to the efforts that took place with your business in order to get all of this paperwork in place for that, so that we can try to understand where the money's going and to make a decision tonight, informed decision, all the hard work that went into it. I do have a question, if you don't mind.
As long as the chair doesn't mind, I don't.
Okay, through the chair, sorry. I'm trying to better understand essentially the root cause. Because when you were explaining, you were saying that your budget is more static, as ours is ever changing.
Yes.
So I'm kind of confused with regards to methodology. Like, why are we being asked to fit a budget that's expected to be static when that's not our, I guess, business model?
Sure.
Because I feel as though this is going to take place year over year over year, because it's always going to be changes that take place as we continue with the economy, with the inflation, student population. So I don't understand how our budget, our expectations are the same in terms of guidance.
Sure. It's a good question. I hope I can answer it to your satisfaction. We have a law called Proposition 2.5, so that the town budget cannot increase its budget annually by any more than 2.5% over the levy limit. So when we begin the budget process, there's a finite number of dollars that are available to fund the town of Stoughton operations, school and municipal side. So what I've done in the past is we try to give the same amount to the schools as to the town to fund its budget. Now, of course, the schools are a much larger budget, so the dollar amount is much greater, but the percentage is the same in order to stay under Proposition 2.5. If we don't stand a Proposition 2.5, we've really got two options if we want additional funding. And the funding is either a Proposition 2.5 override, which is common, not always welcome, but common. And the second one is to use surplus cash generated by the town, town operations. The schools don't generate free cash. Use free cash to fund wherever we need to subsidize unexpected challenges. So right now, it's clear that the schools have got, and that's the beauty of having a superintendent who's so highly regarded. Nobody challenges the superintendent's position that these challenges the school is facing are very unique, very rare, not routine. And so we have to look at how we can fund those challenges, the solution to those challenges. So that the third option is to gut the municipal side, which would reduce police, fire, snow removal, DPW. So that's not an option. Again, the second option is a Proposition 2.5 override to meet unforeseen and unique one-time challenges. And the third option is to use free cash generated by the municipality to fund wherever that deficit is. And as you know, the town had to do that for many years. We had to use free cash to fund operations because apparently back then they had unique unforeseen challenges that were very real that they couldn't fund through the levy limit. So that's how we would propose, those are the tools that are available to us to fund any unforeseen challenges. In your original budget, you had lots of unforeseen challenges that you're trying to find solutions to. And let me tell you something, the select board and the town supports your endeavor in doing that. But the law is very restrictive. We're not like the federal government that can just deficit spend. The state and the municipalities have a statutory requirement to submit and pass balanced budgets. So the only ways to create new revenues is either through an override or through a different use of free cash. Historically, we have used the free cash to fund articles, capital articles. You've got 5 of them this year at town meeting, all worthy projects. I'm losing my mouth is dry. And that's what free cash is used for, surplus cash from municipal operations. And the select board are going to support every one of your articles using free cash. And it's the select board that recommended we use free cash to, without completely decimating the capital budget, because we have capital budget needs as well on the municipal side, that we use as much free cash as we can to get you to the point where you need to be at least a minimum level of where you're at. This is a partnership. These are not the old days. This is a true partnership. We're the ones that recommended using free cash. We're not opposing it. We're recommending it. It was our idea to help you deal with this.
Thank you for that response.
Thank
Can I just
you.
follow up really quickly? Currently, through you. Currently, what's the free cash amount now?
It won't be certified till February 15th. We expect it'll be similar to last year, a little over $5 million.
Last year, did we use it?
We used every penny of
Use
it
every penny of it.
on capital projects.
Okay.
And for, let me see if I got the trace right. Armando brings it up often. Free cash went into the general fund, and the general fund, Chapter 70 went to the general fund, and the town used $2 million of that money to pay for the crises for the healthcare, but the total was $5 million. Thank you. And just for the record, I can't think of a better use of free cash than dealing with the educational challenges we have. That's why I recommended it. Thank you. Strike that. Steve Cavey recommended it.
Chris, did you have a question?
I do.
Oh, microphone.
So, yep. Thank you. Once again, through you, Madam Chair, Dr. Baeta, thank you and your staff for working Herculean efforts and hours to bring us options. I love options, but I want to better understand them. So my understanding is that we went to them with a 15 point, I can't remember the point, 15.5% increase. They're looking for 3.8. My understanding is 3.8 is a balanced budget, looking at what we're doing and they're doing to get us to that 2.5, meaning the red and the black are evened out if we get to that. My understanding is that if we get to a 7.1%, that would empty out every penny of free cash that we're anticipating, I'm guessing. I was told, so there'd be lint in the pockets. We pull the pockets out and there'd be nothing left for the town of Stoughton. But we have that option, but that's what that 7.1%, I was told, so I don't know if it's 7.2. I want, and then anything above and beyond that goes to that override that you were discussing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the pockets being empty.
I'm not, but I'm just
we-
making sure I
we
understand
ex-
how the percentages equate with
So
the
we
different
expect
lines.
about $5 million in free cash.
Okay.
The fire department had a very good year. We've got a $2.5 million billings just for ambulance. So
Okay.
we're having a good year. I'm anticipating between 5 and 6, maybe even more.
You might say that it's a bad year because
I was going to say, it really depends on your perspective there.
Maybe it's the insurance companies. Maybe it's more because we remove the subsidies through fee increases, right? So we may be very surprised that it's substantially north
Right.
of 5 because we used free cash to balance our budget just a year ago. So the $2 million was a number that Mr. Cavey came up with, and I think there are the votes on the board tonight to approve that $2 million. We'll know what free cash is prior to town meeting. And if it came out higher than, I'll say this on the record, if it comes out higher than $5 million with you taking $2 million of it, as long as you'd be taking 2.5 because your capital projects are coming out of free cash as well. Is if it goes up much higher, we'd love to sit down and discuss ways to help you with your operating budget even more than 7%. The reason the 2 was selected is that's, I believe, a town policy. You can't use more than $2 million in free cash. But that policy can be changed with a vote of the board. And so it's going to be your chair and Steve Cavey have, as you know, organized a committee to work together. There's not going to be, I promise you this, any more them and us.
So-
It's a town, and as more money comes in, we'll be the first to tell you it's available.
So just to clarify, because I'm trying to keep my measurement units the same as we prepare for midterm exams.
Okay.
So I'm looking on percentages. So that 2 million, does that represent that 7.1%?
3.8 plus $2 million, 3.8%, if anybody's going to calculate.
Yep, plus-
Plus $2 million is 7.1.
Okay, so my question to Dr. Baeta, option C is funded at what percent? Option B is funded at what percent?
So
And
it's
option A is
you're-
funded at
you
what
have slightly over 11% with option C.
Okay.
So that's why you have to find the 2.4 million once we know more about SOA and anything else. And all I did for the mathematics on the 7.1 or 7.2, just to be, I took 58,768,681, which is our current operating budget. And if you take 3.8% on that, that's 2,230,625. You add 2 million to that, that's 4,230,625. That's how I got this, that goes to 7.2. But, I mean, 7.1, 7.2 is going to be pennies one way or the other. But that's how I came up with those numbers.
But option C is 11% with all of
Correct.
those cuts?
That is correct, with all of the stuff I just announced. So that means 2,465,000 or so still need to be further cut in this budget to balance this budget.
Okay.
And that's with the cuts that I've already, we already got down to this, so.
Right, right. I have a feeling this already answers this question. Does version C in any way, shape, or form move us forward through that plan that we initially put forth with the original budget, maybe in an incremental way?
Yeah, so the work of the committee would be recognizing that if there is SOA money and it, quote, goes through the general fund process or whatever process we use in Stoughton, then what we would do is prioritize the areas that the committee feels through our research and information you feel is our best bang for the buck to bring back. So, for example, we know the EL positions and the interventionists would probably be at the top of the list.
Right.
Right? We know in general education, a social studies position at the high school in order to level class sizes is important for the high school. We know that the management team at the middle school, going with a principal, assistant principal, 2 deans with all the discipline issues, would be potentially a priority. You folks are going to have your say. I'll do the research, give it to you, so you can make that decision on what can we build back. What will be difficult to do is to look long-term at certain curriculum issues that we want to address now. You may say that that's more important than a position or some other expense line.
Right.
The other commitment we should talk about long-term is what are those curriculum purchases that you can make as one-time costs they're in our budget, but we don't have to worry about that $300,000 line item for X curriculum.
Right.
Or whatever the case. So we may have to fast track that so that we can dump it and not have to worry about that constant expense. As you know, curriculum is every 5 to 6 years. You're talking about core areas, and I'll give you an example. We have a brand-new framework in health. What does that mean to our health curriculum? What kind of resources do we have to do for that in the next 2 fiscal years? Do we push it out 3 years, or do we take that potential of saying, okay, that line item is not going to have such a large recurring cost going forward, because we don't need math books for K to 5 or whatever for K to 6 to 8 or so on and so forth. So we would have to prioritize that through our directors and Mr. Ford's office and teachers, and where do we go?
Okay.
Again, making sure that the triennial plan is always at the forefront, and our reading goal. Right, that is, and the reading goal is going to be, it's going to take time. We know that there isn't an impact from one year to another until we really know what we're talking about, which you'll get some of that information by June.
Thank you, and thank you, Town Manager, for those clarifications. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Heidi, Ms. Perkins, sorry.
I just wanted to bring up a couple of points for clarity here and listening at home, et cetera.
The microphone.
Should know this. Sorry, starting over. Just wanted to bring up a couple of points if people are looking at the option C, is that, I'll just take, for instance, in the athletics line, the fact that we've added middle school teams and other integrated teams, et cetera, the level funding would not adequately, in C, would not adequately fund the busing and some of the other costs to maintain where we are now. The other big one I would say is in software. While we might level fund the software we get, and there's quite a few programs that we use in the education, they're still going to continue to rise. So it would mean we would be looking at what software programs we may have to cut. Just a couple of, I just want people to realize it's not level funding that, and we need more devices because we have more students. So level funding that line means we have to look somewhere else to get those. So I just wanted to put a little context with it.
So when you build back, to Heidi's comment, when you build back to get past that 2.4 or 1 million or whatever that number is going to be, you're going to have this running list that we're going to give you and say, what's your priority? Is it to buy 100 more Chromebooks, or is it to buy more paper, or is it to hire whatever? You guys will get all of that information. You'll get recommendations from me based on data and all that stuff, but it'll be your call.
And just one other point on the free cash, even though it's not, necessarily a lot compared to the total free cash, we do the Medicaid billing, and the town does receive that funding. So it averages, maybe around $300,000 a year. Again, drop in the bucket compared to the overall. But I did want to say that the school does also contribute to free cash. So I just wanted to make that little point.
So your vote tonight to meet a deadline and everything else is basically adding the 7.1 number as a bottom number vote, with the understanding that the school committee is going to continue to consider its options prior to FinCom, after House 1, and so on and so on.
One more point of clarification, Madam Chair, through you. We can vote on that now. Do we have the option to go back and amend that should, state money come through, newcomer money
So-
come through?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes, and you have 2 fiscal years, in the last 2 fiscal years that the school committee has done that. One was in the fall town meeting in November of '22, and one was this past year when the SOA money came in higher than the 1.19% increase to the school budget, of which you kept and supported 2.9 million, then the other 2, as we know, the healthcare crisis. So, yep.
We will be presenting to FinCom, and that will be one place where we can ask to open the budget and have additional funding added for Chapter 70. I think at that point, we will have a very clear idea of our priorities and be able to lay out very clearly for them, because they will certainly ask, why do you need this money? And we will be able to clearly show that we need it for specific tasks, and that's one of our goals.
Thank you for that clarification, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to take this very publicly because we'll get a lot of questions on this. Our starting budget is currently current fiscal year is $58,700, I believe it's $681. The current FY24 is $58,681. So I asked Heidi, since she's the number cruncher lady, what is 7.1% added to that? If that's the actual number. Yeah, I just want to make sure we do it so that way people, because they've already heard 7.2, 7.1, it's not a lot, it's pennies, but if we do it together as a group, we know the money, Tom has it for his board, and everybody heard the same thing.
I hate to get this motion wrong. Right?
Yeah, well, please.
Joe, so 58 million,
700,681 is our current FY24 budget.
got it?
Adding, it's either 7.1 or 7.2, whatever makes it the balanced.
7.1 is 62,868, 129.
All right, so it'd be $62,868, 420, excuse me, $6,868,429 is your,
The multiplier was 71.
yeah.
1.071. So doing that 58,700, 681 times 1.071 is the number I just gave you, 628, 68429.
So that would be the number.
May I repeat that?
Yeah.
Just for clarity? I'm racing back there, so let me take a vote. FY '24 is 58,700, 681, plus 7.1% equals a FY '25 budget of 62,868,429.
Correct. Yes.
That's lower than version C.
Slightly, yes. It's that 7.1 situation. Yes, it is lower than your option C, as you're meeting the 7.1 of the town recommendation.
But then we would be able to revisit it once we know Chapter 70 funding. And potentially, we have version C all ready to go. We're hoping that we get at least the 2.5 million from Chapter 70 funding, SOA funding. That's our hope, but we don't know for another 10 days, so. But we will be able to reopen the budget with FinCom and argue for more money once the Chapter 70 comes in,
Can we not wait for the 10 days and make that decision?
because the charter says so, the town charter.
And can the select board change the town charter?
That's the charter, the town meeting, yes.
Madam Chair, may I make one more
Yes.
comment with respect to the legislative process? We'll get House 1 in the next week or two,
Next Wednesday, I heard.
which is the governor's budget. We used to say inside the chamber, we appreciate his counsel, but it has no place in the budget process. It's just Governor Healy's recommendation. The good news is, in March, we get what's called consensus revenue. The consensus revenue is a vote by the House and the Senate, which is a promise that says your Chapter 70 local aid numbers will not go lower than this. Municipalities, go finish your budget. And then in April, the House and the Senate actually go into budget deliberations, but as you know, this year, they didn't pass a final budget till after July 1st. So the good news is, once you get House 1, that's the floor. The consensus budget, because the legislature always likes to look better than the governor, goes up on revenue consensus for Chapter 70. So I would say that the number you should peg it to, House 1 will be interesting and no lower, but the consensus budget a couple of weeks later by the legislature will be the more realistic number. And also we'll have by February 15th free cash. So if it explodes because of the subsidies that have been closed and the cuts were made and the revenues were generated, then we'll be happy to have a conversation about your other options and how we can help further with that. The select board can pass a policy to exceed the $2 million, and I know that each one of them are very supportive of getting you through this. So you helped us, we want to be helpful to you. So thank you. If you mind, I'll excuse myself to get to the meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I-
Question. Does anyone have any questions? Are you ready to move?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment and then I can make a motion. So I think I don't want to be like super repetitive, but I don't want to be the only person who doesn't express my like deep gratitude to all of the folks in this room who have done so much work to give us options. And I echo Chris's statement of like, it is helpful to have all these options laid out and just like, thank you. I think given Dr. Briley, you really ran through the list. We have like really unprecedented need in our student population between our increasing population of girls, like the shelter population, increasing special education needs, growing enrollment. Like we are really dealing with a lot right now. I think for that reason, I think in the interest of a balanced budget, we do need to vote, and I'll make a motion on that in a second for the 7.1% increase. But also wanted to name that like we're using some free cash to cover in order to balance the budget here. I do think that has some implications down the road just because it's available. Like that's going to impact our bond rating as we get into MSBA reimbursement for the elementary school project. So I just want to name that so that we are aware of it. And I think that and the unprecedented need for Chapter 70 funding and anything else that comes from the state is like, we are going to have to reopen the budget when we get to FinCom and talk about how we can meet some of these needs and build back using this like incredibly helpful prioritized list of like all of the tools we have here. So sorry, do you want to?
No, I just wanted to say, not only the list you got tonight, which was predominantly around positions and then straight line items, materials and supplies, we'll give you that detail in batches so that you can see what it is. For example, the Chromebooks, can't go without them. It is what it is, that type of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. No, not at all. So I just, it's a lot. It's been confusing. There's been a lot of support from you all and understanding it and just like making our way through it. And I really hope that we are able to come back to this once we have more information from the state about how they're going to help us support our highest needs students. So on that note, are we open to a motion or? Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions before we proceed to a motion? Any questions? Heidi's been waiting patiently for questions, and we have any questions for you. We'll get to questions here, I'm sure.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to open the FY25 school committee budget and amend the bottom line to an increase of 7.1% over FY24, which is dollar amount $62,868,429.
So that's the motion on the table that's been seconded by Chris. Does anybody have any other motions they would like to make?
I'd like to make a motion that we stick with version A.
All right. So motion to, and that's just to keep the original budget.
It's the original budget. If we're able to visit it, I see no difference in picking a poorer budget now and reverse it. Why don't we pick the best budget for the kids and revisit, depending upon what money comes in?
All right, so that was the motion to keep the original budget as is, as voted on December 12th, 2023. Is there a second for that? I'll second it, just to keep it on the table. So let's have a vote on the first, or any more debate, discussion before we get to voting? All right. Let's vote on the first motion, which is to reopen the budget and to, with a new bottom line of $62,868,429, which is an increase of 7.1%. Vote?
Aye.
No.
Aye. All right, the motion is carried 3-2. Let's go ahead and vote on the second vote, which is a motion to keep the original budget as is.
No.
Aye.
No. All right, that motion was 2-3. So the motion to amend the budget by 7.1% passed. We will be revisiting this, so we are not done with the budget. Again, thank you to everyone here for all of your work. Really appreciate all the work, the explanations. I know this has not been fun. We would love to just have the money fall off the tree, but it's not there yet. Our next regular meeting is Tuesday, February the 13th at 7 p.m. here at the conference room at the district office. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion was made by Lindsay, second.
Second.
Seconded by Armando. Roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion is carried 5-0. The meeting is adjourned at, what time is it? 7:05. I thank you all for coming. Be safe out there, and good night.